Part 3. Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day, 6:00. 9 men and women sat around a circular table. The heads of 8 fingers, 8 divisions were there, but they did not look at each other. Either they studied the documents in their hands or spoke to the minions awaiting orders behind them. It did not feel like they were from the same organization at all. Things were not yet at a hair-trigger stage, but their wariness against potential enemies was obvious enough. However, that much was only to be expected. They might be in the same organization and worked with each other, but the fact was that they mainly cut into each other's profits with the occasional bout of what might be considered cooperation. The drugs division was the prime example, handling all aspects of production, processing and trafficking by themselves. The smuggling and other divisions would not raise a finger to help them. Even if they did not openly oppose each other, it was common enough for them to try and trip each other up behind the scenes. These activities, which did no good to the organization, stemmed from the fact that they had once been disparate crime rings which had banded together. The reason why these viceroys of vice gathered on specific days for 8 Fingers Division head meetings was because not doing so would be disadvantageous to them. That was to say, not taking part in these meetings could be taken as a sign of treachery, and absent parties would thus be marked for elimination. Therefore, even those people who did not commonly come to the royal capital would do so just for these meetings. Even those people who typically spent their days hiding in a safe house would essentially come here to expose themselves. Those who were so afraid of assassination that they surrounded themselves in guards would do the same. There was a limited number of people allowed at each meeting, and so each of the participants brought 2 of their finest men from their own divisions, in addition to themselves. However, one person stood as an exception to this. "Since we're all here, let's begin the regular meeting." As that male voice spoke, the gathered people returned to their seats and their chairs creaked. The speaker was the host of this event, the coordinator of 8 Fingers. This man, who looked to be in his 50s, wore a holy symbol of the water god on a necklace and had a compassionate face. He did not look at all like a denizen of the underworld. There are several matters which need discussion, and the first of them is Hilma. Present. The person who answered was a fair-skinned woman. Said skin was so pale she almost looked sickly, and her clothes were also white. She held a pipe which emitted purple fumes in one hand. A serpentine tattoo snaked up that hand toward her shoulder. Her lipstick was the same purple as her eyeshadow. In her diaphanous clothing, she was the very picture of a high-class prostitute, complete with the dissipated air which hung about her. "Kuo," she yawned in an exaggerated manner. "Couldn't we have started the meeting earlier? I heard your drug plantations were attacked by someone?" "Yes, they hit the villages we were using for production. Cost me quite a sum. We may need to cut back in the drug supply." "Any idea who might be behind this?" "No. None at all. However, as a result, it's not difficult to think of who might have done it." "Which color?" That question was enough for everyone present to understand. "No clue. I just learned the village was attacked. Didn't have time to find out more." "Is that so? Then everyone, that's how it is. Please raise your hands if you know anything." There was no response. Either nobody knew, or nobody wanted to share what they knew. Then, next on. "Oi!" It was a low voice. It was a male voice, and it concealed incredible power within its depths. All eyes turned to the source of that voice. The speaker was a bald man whose face was half covered by an animal tattoo. However, every part of him was immense. His muscular frame was evident even through his clothes, and his cold eyes were those of a warrior. All the other division heads had brought guards along, but only he had nobody behind him. That was only sensible. What point was there in bringing a group of useless people along? The man stared at Hilma, head of the drugs division. No, he was probably not staring. Just that his razor-thin pupils appeared to be doing so. The guard behind her lost his cool for a moment, and his breathing turned chaotic. It was a reaction born of knowing exactly how overmatched he was in fighting strength. After all, this man was a monster. He would have no problem slaughtering everyone in this room. Why not hire me? Do you think the mooks on your payroll can protect anything? His name was Zero. He was the manager of the security division, which handled everything from simple bodyguarding to escorting nobles. He was famous for his battle prowess, which far exceeded that of any other member of Eight Fingers. And the response to his proposal was, "There's no need for that." Was a firm rejection. There's no need for that. Besides, I can't reveal the location of my bases to others. That was the end of it. Zero closed his eyes, as though he had lost interest. Doing this made him resemble a boulder. That would be great. I'll accept your proposal on her behalf. The speaker was a slender man. He looked limp and weak, in stark contrast to Zero. Zero, I want to hire your people. Oh, what's this, Crocodile? Can you afford it? If one considered Hilma's business, the drug trade, to be booming, then this man's field, the slave trade, was declining by the day. That was because the Golden Princess had made slavery illegal, and as a result, he had to go underground with his business. That's fine, Zero. And if possible, I'd like to hire someone on the level of the Six Arms, the best of the best. Oh. Zero opened his eyes again, as though his interest was reignited. He was not the only one who was surprised. Just about everyone present was thinking the same thought. The name of Six Arms came from the brother to the god of thieves, who had 6 arms. That name referred to the strongest fighters of the security division. Of course their top man was Zero, but the other 5 had prowess rivaling his. Rumor had it that one of them could cleave through space, another could control illusions, and that one of them was even a powerful undead being known as an Elder Lich. If Gaze of Strahnof or Adamantite-ranked adventurers could be considered the mightiest warriors in polite society, then Six Arms were the greatest killers of the underworld. Hiring somebody like that could only mean one thing. Gotten ourselves into big trouble, haven't we? Have no fear. My strongest subordinates will protect your assets. Do forgive the inconvenience. There's been problems with a woman who was supposed to be eliminated. Perhaps this might be an overreaction, but if that place goes down, I'll be in a hell of a fix. Yes, we'll discuss the fees later. Of course. Can you send your man over right after the meeting ends? There's something I'd like him to do right away. Got it. I brought someone along. I'll lend him to you. Then, on to the next topic. Regarding the newly minted Adamantite-ranked adventurer Mon of Darkness. Does anyone know about him, or have they made any overtures towards him? Intermission. The sound of valuable metals clinking against each other rang forth. After ensuring that the upended purse was empty, Ains began sorting out the shiny coins scattered on the table. He placed 10 silver or gold coins into each stack, and then he counted them up. After totaling the stacks of coins several times, Ains looked inside the purse. It was empty, as expected. After verifying that fact, Ains cast it aside, and then grabbed his head. Not enough. There's not enough money at all. His illusory human face twisted in depression. Of course the money before him was a sizable sum. An ordinary citizen could labor for decades and not accumulate this amount. However, to the master of the Great Tomb of Nazarick and its only source of income, it was little more than pocket change, a fact that made him terribly uneasy. Ains's mental state would be forcibly stabilized once it was disrupted beyond a certain threshold. Therefore, he should have been automatically calmed down once the shock of having insufficient money kicked in and assaulted his psyche. However, the sum of old coins he possessed gave him some emotional leeway, and so the emotional cutoff did not trigger. Instead, he burned in the slow fires of anxiety. Ains shook his head, and divided the gold coins before him into several piles. First, this is additional funding for Sebas. The pile of money before him dwindled in an instant, and Ains's face twitched. Then there's this pile. Funds for rebuilding and financial aid for the Lizardmen village, in accordance with Kokaida's wishes, and then It was less than before, but the pile of money shifted, leaving only a few gold pieces behind. This money is going towards the Lizardmen village's expenses, so if I buy from the Adventurers Guild, I can use my reputation as an adamantite ranked adventurer to open doors for me. That should make things cheaper. So perhaps this will do? He recovered several coins from Kokaida's pile. After counting and recounting the remaining coins, Ains muttered quietly to himself. Maybe I should get a merchant to sponsor me or something. It'd be a good way to set up a regular income stream outside of adventuring. There were only 3 adamantite-ranked adventurer teams in the kingdom, including Ains's own. Therefore, sometimes merchants would make requests of them by name. These jobs were both easy and profitable for Ains, and he could easily stand to take a few. However, he had not done so until now. That was because Ains wanted to avoid giving merchants or adventurers the impression that his Mon persona was a money grubber, or perhaps one who would do anything for money. Ains intended to build a public image of an adventurer who was loved by all, and then transfer that glory to Ains Zuelgaon. Thus, he had to be mindful of what other people thought of him. Still, I'm penniless. Shouldn't have stayed in such an expensive inn. Ains looked around the opulent room. This was the best inn in all of Erantil, and this was its best room. Naturally, the prices for this room were equally staggering. However, this superior room meant nothing to Ains, who did not need to sleep. How he longed to spend the money somewhere else. The same went for his meals. However splendid the dishes which the inn prepared for him, it was all meaningless to Ains, who could not eat them. It would be wiser to cancel the meals and save the money. However, Ains knew exactly why he could not do that. Ains. No, Mon was the sole adamantite-ranked adventurer in this city. A big name like himself could not possibly live in a flophouse where he had to take care of everything himself. Living standards were an easy way of benchmarking people. An adamantite-ranked adventurer had to lead a lifestyle consistent with an adamantite-ranked adventurer, such as the inn where he stayed and what he wore. Clothes did make the man, after all. Thus, Ains could not lower himself to stay in cheap lodgings. It was the same even though he understood that this was a waste of money. If they think I'm really this valuable, then the guild ought to book me a room. Although, they'd probably do it if I asked. That said, he did not want to owe people favors. To date, whenever the guild made urgent requests of him, he would move into action immediately to make them feel indebted to him. Once he had accumulated enough leverage, he would then start calling in his markers. If he allowed people to pay off their debts with such small things, his plan would be ruined. There's no money. Whatever shall I do? More requests, perhaps? But there haven't been any good-paying jobs recently. And if I take too many on, the other adventurers will start to hate me. While he wanted Ains Zuelgaon to become an eternal legend, obviously he did not want that name to become infamous. Ains made the semblance of a sigh, then memorized that amount of spending cash he had from the pile. Speaking of money, what about the guardian's salary? Ains went and leaned back against his chair, looking at the ceiling. The guardians insisted on not drawing a salary, saying that their greatest joy in life was to serve the supreme beings, so they would not dare think of taking payment for it. However, Ains felt that he should not rely too much on their goodwill. One need to reward work done in an appropriate fashion. While the guardians had all indicated that loyalty to the supreme beings was the best reward, that statement did not sit easy with Ains. Perhaps that was the conceit of a man who drew his pay by showing up for work, but he felt that labor ought to be compensated. For all he knew, instituting a salary system might lead to the fall and corruption of these pure and naive children. Even so, he felt that it held merit as an experiment. The question now is how I should pay them. Ains's eyes went from the ceiling to the diminished pile of gold coins on the table. If we consider the guardian's salary to be equivalent to that of a department head in a high-end company, that means they draw 15 million yen per year. Schiltier, Cocytus, Aura, Mare Demiurge and Albedo ought to be getting more, right? Which means I'll have to multiply that by 6. It can't be helped. I can't make that much money. Ains grabbed his head in contemplation, and then his eyes shot open. Got it. I just need to pay them with something else. Maybe I could issue Nazarick-only bills like play money, perhaps, and then fix their value at 100,000 a piece. That would do it. But after shouting that, Ains's face twisted again. How would he make everyone use these bills? All the facilities in the great underground tomb of Nazarick were free of charge. Even if he did print those bills, he had no idea where to begin using them. What if they were used to buy items from this world? After comparing the goods of this world to those of Nazarick, he could not help but wonder who would even want to buy things from the outside world. These facilities have been free until now, but if I start charging for them, I'd be putting the cart before the horse. What should I do? After pondering for a while more, Ains hit on another bright idea. Got it. I'll ask the Guardians to think of something. All I need to do is ask them what they'd be willing to spend money on. That ought to do it. Just as Ains was muttering, "What a great idea," to himself, his face turned sour again. Still, I'm talking to myself more and more, Ains thought. While all this had still been a game, he knew he had been talking to himself a lot because there was nobody else around. However, now that the NPCs had gained sapience will and self-direction, he was still talking to himself. Why was that? Was it because it had become a habit? Or was it because I'm still alone, huh? Ains laughed in loneliness. Of course, he was surrounded by sapient NPCs, so it was hard to say that he was truly alone. However, he still felt that way. Perhaps he was busy erasing the personality of Suzuki Satoru in order to play the role of Ainswell Gown, the coordinator of the 41 Supreme Beings, whom the Guardians wanted. Ains sighed, and as he looked back at the coins on his desk, he heard a knocking on the door. After a short while, the door opened. Once he had verified that it was the person he had expected, Narborough Gamma, Ains put on a face. Right now, the corner of Ains's mouth was curled up, as though he were looking down on her. The low-level illusion which Ainz was using reflected his thoughts, so it might occasionally display an expression which did not fit the ruler of the great underground tomb of Nazarick. Therefore, whenever someone else was around, and particularly in front of Narborough, he typically put on an expression which made him seem like a stern and dignified ruler. He had practiced it before the mirror many times, honing that expression to perfection. "What is it, Nabe?" His voice was the same faked one he always had. "Yes, Mon-san. There's the old habit again. Whenever I remind you, you change for a while, so I guess I should give up on that, huh?" "Ah, no need to bow. I'm not angry, and the fact that you show respect to me, well, that's fine too. The guild master and the others seem to have gotten the wrong impression, so it's fine. Now then, what are you here for?" "Yes. It concerns the ore which you ordered the merchants to find, Mon-san." "I didn't give any orders, it was just business," Ains grumbled inside his heart. That said, the stern expression on his face remained unmoved. "Really now? Which location are we talking about? Have they gathered samples from all 8 places?" "My deepest apologies, but I did not ask that much." "Never mind, then. We have money. Even if we don't know where they came from, we should be able to buy them all up." Ains grandly swept the coins on the desk into a pouch and tossed it to Narborough. He watched as she decorously picked up the pouch of money. "Understood. However, may I be permitted a question? Why I'm purchasing ore from various locations?" Narborough nodded, and Ains explained. "I intend to throw them into the exchange box. Simply put, I wish to see if the money I get from the ores changes with the location. The exchange box should not be affected by such things. For instance, even an exquisitely carved statue would only count the same as an unworked lump of the same material when fed into the exchange box. That being the case, what if the composition, the intrinsic quality of the material varied? That was why he had purchased all those ores. Nabe, you know that I managed to fix a price by throwing grain into the box. I had to throw in quite a pile of grain before getting one measly coin, Ains grumbled in his heart. If that were the case, all he had to do was commence mass production. Thus, he had considered breaking ground on grain farms outside Nazareth, manned by undead or golems in order to tend large farms. Of course, actually executing that plan presented a mountain of problems in its own right. Understood. Then I shall make the purchases immediately. However, be careful. We can't guarantee nobody will make a move on you. If anything happens. You understand, right? I will use this shadow demon as a meat shield. I will not think about obtained information and prioritize safety by retreating with all due haste. I will then teleport to Orasama's fake Nazareth to deceive the foe. Very good. Pay attention to safety and do not travel in secluded areas or take routes which make you vulnerable to attack. Also, do not beat people half to death if they bother you or try and chat you up. In all honesty, I was quite surprised when that man wept and begged me to save him and said he was only trying to flirt with you. Also, you are not to project your murderous intentions everywhere. Crushing pickpockets' hands might be acceptable, but do not do it all the time. Also, do not, under any circumstances, refer to humans as insects. Simply put, keep your injurious impulses in check. After all, we are Mon and Nabe, the highest-ranking adventurers known as Darkness. Once he saw an arbor indicate that she understood, Ains felt that there was nothing else to remind her about, and nodded. That should be it. Go then, Nabe. Still holding the pouch, Narborough bowed before leaving the room. As Ains watched her leave, he sighed deeply, despite his lack of lungs. To think I have to make expenditures while I'm low on cash. What a pain. End chapter.